quiet evening in a suburban backyard suddenly turns violent as three officers surround a black woman by a pool. She pleads, "I didn't do anything," but the officers show no mercy. In a cruel moment, one officer shoves her into the water, and they laugh as she struggles to stay afloat. Behind a wooden fence, a little boy watches, his small hands gripping his phone. He records everything. When the officers leave, the boy approaches the woman, showing her the footage. "I caught it all," he whispers. The woman, soaking wet and shaking, nods. "We need to show the world." The video goes viral. The officers are arrested. Justice is served. And it all began because one boy refused to stay silent. It was a quiet evening in a suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where trouble wasn't supposed to happen. Streetlights flickered, and a warm breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. But in the backyard of a house on the corner, something sinister was unfolding. A black woman, drenched in sweat from running, stood trembling near the edge of a large swimming pool. Surrounding her were three police officers, their faces void of empathy, their hands resting on their belts. "I didn't do anything wrong," the woman pleaded, her voice shaking. "Please, just let me go." One officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, stepped closer. "You think you can just talk back to the police? We tell you what to do. You don't get a choice." Another officer, a stocky man with a sneer, shook his head. "You don't belong in this neighborhood anyway. What were you doing here?" The woman swallowed hard. "I live here. I was just coming back from a walk." The third officer, a lean man with piercing blue eyes, scoffed. "Sure you were. Someone called in a suspicious person. That means you." The woman took a step back, feeling the edge of the pool behind her heels. "I swear, I didn't do anything wrong." The buzz-cut officer smirked. "Well, we don't believe you." Without warning, he shoved her hard. She gasped, arms flailing, as her feet lost grip. A loud splash followed as her body hit the water, sending waves crashing against the tile. The officers laughed. "Oops," the stocky one said mockingly. "Guess she slipped." Unseen by them, a small figure stood hidden behind the wooden fence bordering the yard. A little boy, no older than 10, clutched his phone tightly in his small hands. His wide brown eyes reflected the horror of what he'd just witnessed. He had been watching the entire time, his tiny fingers pressing record, the moment things took a dark turn. The woman surfaced, coughing and gasping for breath. She kicked toward the edge of the pool, grabbing onto it as her soaked clothes weighed her down. The officers didn't offer to help. They didn't even glance back. "Let's go," one of them muttered, already turning toward their patrol car. "She's not worth our time." The little boy held his breath, afraid to move, until he heard the sound of tires crunching against gravel. Once the officers were gone, he let out a shaky exhale. The woman pulled herself up, her arms shaking as she climbed out of the pool. She sat there, dripping wet, staring at the ground as if trying to process what had just happened. The boy hesitated before pushing open the fence gate. He stepped forward cautiously. Are you okay, miss?" The woman's head snapped up, startled. Her eyes softened when she saw the boy. I think so," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The boy looked down at his phone, the video still playing on the screen. He knew this wasn't right. He knew something had to be done. "I recorded everything," he said quietly. "They didn't know I was watching." The woman's eyes widened as he held out the phone to show her. She watched in silence as the footage played back the cruelty, the laughter, the violence. Tears welled in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "What's your name?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated before answering Marcus. She nodded, her lips pressing into a determined line. "Marcus, you just did something really important." Marcus shifted on his feet. "What do we do now?" She took a deep breath. "We show the world." Marcus nodded and handed her the phone. With trembling fingers, she hit the share button. Within minutes, the video was online. It spread faster than wildfire, By the time the officers had returned to the station, their names were already trending for all the wrong reasons. People were outraged. News stations picked up the story. Celebrities, politicians, and activists demanded justice. The police department was forced to launch an immediate investigation. By morning, the officers were suspended. By the afternoon, they were arrested. Protesters lined the streets, chanting the woman's name, demanding accountability. Marcus stood beside her as she spoke to reporters, her voice strong despite the fear still lingering in her heart. "They thought no one was watching," she said. "But a child saw everything." Marcus stepped forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. "I saw what they did. And the world saw it too." The officers sat in the courtroom, their smug grins long gone, replaced with nervous glances and pale faces. The once confident men who had laughed at their cruelty now fidgeted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes flickering toward the door, hoping to avoid the inevitable. The gallery was full, the tension thick in the air. Outside, protesters had gathered, chanting for justice, their voices echoing through the city streets. The woman, who had once been helpless in the face of their brutality, now sat proudly at the front of the courtroom. Her eyes were steely with determination, but her heart was heavy. She had fought not just for herself, but for every person who had been silenced by injustice. She glanced over at the boy, Marcus, who was sitting beside her, his small hands folded in his lap. His courage had been the spark that set everything in motion. The prosecutor stood up, his voice strong and clear as he addressed the jury. These officers, sworn to protect and serve, chose to abuse their power. Their actions were not only cruel, but a blatant violation of the law. And, thanks to the courage of a young boy who dared to speak the truth, we now have undeniable proof of their wrongdoing. The defense attorney stood, attempting to regain control. "Your Honor, the video is incomplete. It doesn't capture the full context of the situation. These officers were simply doing their jobs." But the judge was unmoved, his eyes narrowing. "The full context is irrelevant. We've all seen the video. There is no justification for this brutality." The officers exchanged anxious looks. Their hands trembled as the verdict was read aloud, each word carrying the weight of the justice they had long evaded. "Guilty," the judge declared. The room erupted in murmurs. The woman's heart swelled as she turned to Marcus, a small smile crossing her face. Justice had been served. And they had won. The judge's voice echoed through the silent room. Handcuffs clicked around their wrists. The woman and Marcus watched as the officers were led away. Justice had been served. And it all started because a little boy refused to look away.